What's up, Perichoresis? This is day 2 of our new series for the month of November called Prayer. Yesterday we talked about how Jesus says when you pray, don't be like the hypocrites. So in other words, there's a way to not do it. We broke down what that meant yesterday. Then Jesus continues the thought. Again, clarifying, when you talk to God, don't do it like this. In other words, maybe there's a way to not pray. And this is what Jesus says in Matthew 6. He says, when you pray, don't be like the hypocrites. And then he explains, for they love to pray publicly on street corners and in the synagogues where everyone can see them. Now, some of us, while you're watching this, you're like, okay, good. Put a check in that box. I'm not going to go to any street corner anywhere and just start praying publicly. Of course not, because that's weird. We should not do that. But again, what did it mean to them then? So what does it mean to us now? Jesus is talking about when you talk to God, it's really important to be authentic. We talked about that yesterday. Don't put on a mask. Don't pretend to be someone you're not. Just be real when you're talking to God. Because after all, God knows more about you than you know about you. So Jesus is talking about the importance of being authentic, taking those walls down, taking those masks off, and your thoughts, your worries, your concerns, your angers, your emotions, all of those things, express those. Talk, have a conversation with God about those. And because you're being authentic, don't be all public with that stuff. In fact, this is actually what Jesus says. He says, don't do it publicly because being real is important. He says, when you pray in public, that is all the reward that we'll get. Now, this is interesting. Jesus actually brings up this idea. He introduces this idea that with prayer comes a reward. We got to put that on the shelf, right? Because that's a really interesting point. But he says, people who pray publicly, their reward, that's all they're going to get, is this idea of what people seem to think about them. And if you really think about it, if you're not being real, that reward is fake. So there must be a bigger, more beautiful, more powerful, and authentic reward. So how do we do it? Jesus says in Matthew 6, he says, don't be like the hypocrites who pray in public and blah, blah, blah. He says, because that's all the reward they're going to get. He does say, but when you pray, this is the first time he's breaking it down in a positive light, but when you pray, go away by yourself, shut the door behind you, and pray to your Father in private. Then your Father who sees everything will reward you. Again, he's bringing up this idea of a reward and how it's connected to prayer. And Jesus' advice, again, he hasn't even taught us how to pray yet, but he says, don't do it like that. Don't be all public or whatever. When you pray, be real, be honest. And when you are, then chances are, don't do that in public. Go alone to a private place, close the door behind you, and be honest and real with God alone. In other words, get away from the world. Get away from distractions. Get away from people. Get away from this idea that you need to look and act and sound a certain way when it comes to your relationship with God. No, get away from that stuff. It's just you and Him. So, how can we be practical about that? When you pray, that's what Jesus says, when you pray. I know you pray. You pray, at all times of the day. You pray before a test, a quiz, when you're getting in your car, when you're about to eat your bowl of Wheaties, whatever, right? But when you pray, be real. And when you pray, get alone. Get away from the distractions of the planet. Just be you and God so you can have this safe space to connect with Him.